You are now tuned in to the Storm Tracker Podcast.
Frank Tucker representing for CanesCounty.com, and we are tracking everything Miami Hurricanes, and it's transfer portal week. It's been a record-setting week when it comes to the transfer portal. Over 1,000 players have gone into the transfer portal. Miami's on a few here, and a lot of positions in need for the Hurricanes when it comes to DB, running back, wide receiver, just to name a few here. But of all the names that Miami has offered thus far, Frank, which names are you most interested in? Which players do you think Miami has the best chance of landing?
There's a few of them. A guy that they haven't offered yet that I think is going to start picking up some steam is Dante Thornton out of Oregon, big receiver. I think, receivers obviously a spot where they're looking pretty heavily. Dorian Singer, extremely productive receiver out of Arizona. I think he had like 1,100 yards, 66 catches last season. He's a name to watch as they start to finalize their options at receiver. We got Robbie Washington and Ray Joseph in this class, and they're still trying to go after Tayshawn Lyons and Andy Jean and guys like that. So, I think receivers is going to be a spot where they go after. Sevin McGee is another guy that I heard Miami's talking to a little bit. Explosive slot receiver, has some ability to jump in the backfield as a receiving back as well. So that's an interesting name for me. And then obviously, Donovan McMillan just picked up an offer from Miami, safety out of Florida. With Brian Ballum just transferring out, there's a need depth-wise to bring in a safety, at least one in this class. Because there is no safety committed in 2023 right now. Robert Stafford probably has the makeup to be able to do it, but overall, Cormani McLean's not that guy to play safety. And Antoine Jackson.
Caleb Spencer, though.
They did get Caleb Spencer, but from what I'm hearing, Caleb Spencer is going to be more of like an overhang player. He's not going to be a guy that they really utilize as like an over-the-top safety, almost more like a linebacker. He might actually transition there at some point in his college career, just because, big body, obviously a very physical player when you watch him on tape. There were times in high school where he was actually playing strictly as an off-ball linebacker, not even just as an overhang safety. So I don't see him, being that guy to replace Brian Ballum and Avante Williams. And they're going to need somebody to come up behind Cam Kinchins and James Williams. There's just not a ton of bodies right there on the roster. Kind of similar to defensive tackle. Right now, you lose Darrell Jackson. Elijah Roberts was playing some D tackle as well. They're gonna have to find some D tackle options. Alan High's gone. You can't go in with just the 4 or 5 guys that you got on the roster right now. I know Jacob Lichtenstein comes back for his 17th year of college football, but overall, it's like you're going to need some extra guys, right? Like you need some bodies. And with the way Cristobal has kind of talked about the trenches since coming to Miami, it's kind of surprising that a guy like Darrell Jackson would jump in the portal. I know that there were some family things on the background that forced him to go back to Florida State and Tallahassee, but it was super surprising for me. It was super surprising. I didn't hear any movement on that. He's going to have to even get an appeal to play next season because this is his second time transferring. So a little weird. I think that they're going to start pushing really heavy for defensive tackle. The offensive guard from Alabama, I see him potentially ending up in this class, hearing a lot of good things on that end as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And once again, this is CanesCounty.com representing for the Rivals Network. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube. Follow us on Twitter at Canes_County. Also follow us on Instagram, Canes.County. And also follow us on Facebook. Follow this podcast on all podcast platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and SoundCloud. But yeah, you spoke a little bit about Javion Cohen. Now that's a player that I think Miami really has some momentum with right now. He actually did confirm that on Twitter that an official visit is locked in for Miami. From what I understand, he's not coming this weekend, but he'll be here next weekend. So that is a guy who definitely fills in, some spots when it comes to the trenches. He's a plug and play guy immediately to that offensive line. With him being a junior, 6'4", 305 pounds, I think he is somebody that Miami definitely needs when it comes to the trenches. And then also, Miami did offer Tunmiz Adelayi.
Tanmisi
I mean,
Adelaide.
sorry if I butchered that name, but he's definitely a guy that Miami offered out of Texas A&M, 6'4", 290. He's a guy that was previously committed to Ohio State before committing to the Aggies. Redshirted his first year, saw minimal action, but he's definitely a guy who could be in that rotation for Miami. Miami also offered Dante Cephas, a wide receiver out of Kent State. And they also offered another wide receiver, Dorian Singer, one of the top players out of the Pac-12 out of Arizona. And they most recently offered, as far as receivers concerned, is Rara Thomas, a receiver out of Mississippi State. Just like Miami, they have a mass exodus over there in Starkville. Bunch of players are jumping into the portal over there. By the way, did you see the running back that jumped into the portal from Mississippi State? What he said on there, saying, Coach Leach doesn't think I'm tough, and he doesn't care if I leave, so I'm entering the transfer portal. Did you see that?
Yeah. Do you remember what he said when they took a loss towards the end of the year?
Nah.
That all his team wants to do is eat fish fillets and hang out with their fat girlfriends. I was like, my God.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Leach is a national treasure, man. I love that guy, but apparently that's not boding well with the players. We got a bunch of players jumping into the portal, including Xavier Thomas, wide receiver at Mississippi State, Nathaniel Watson, linebacker out of Mississippi State. And Dylan Johnson is the running back that I was speaking of, also in the portal. So, Miami has kind of jumped on a ton of guys when it comes to who they're offering. But let's talk a little bit about who they didn't offer and who they should offer as far as who's in the portal. Who are some of those guys for you?
For me, Justin Flo. Justin Flo is the most interesting name for me. If you go back and watch that kid's highlight tape in high school, he's the best linebacker I've ever seen. Just from an evaluation standpoint, freaky athletic, dominates people. He little boys, people picking him up in the air and waving to the crowd, doing his best Will Anderson. Or not, who was that? The Georgia, the Jalen Carter. Jalen Carter did it out of Georgia. But, he's just the type of player that we've been fiending for at linebacker for a long time at Miami. Big, fast, strong, can drop into coverage, can come up and play the run. He can do all those things. And I think he fits a need at linebacker, right? Like, it's great to have Wesley Bissainthe. It's great to have 4 kids committed. It's still great to go after Stanquan Clark, but you were trying to flip that room from what it was before. This has been a travesty since the time of Manny Diaz's arrival, right? Like, we can talk about, the Shaq Quartermans and the Michael Pinckneys and Zach McLeods, right? Where there was semi-success there. But it's been a long time since we've had really good linebacker play. Denzel Perryman is a old man in the NFL now. And honestly, it's like him.
He make the Pro Bowl this year, though.
Yeah. He's 150 tackles every year. Doesn't age. But honestly, he's a guy that I think Miami, fits really well right now. Obviously, he has that track record with Mario Cristobal, as he was the guy who brought him from California to Oregon as the number 1 linebacker in the country. Another guy that I haven't seen a reported offer, but I have heard that there is mutual interest, is Tony Grimes out of North Carolina, former number 1 cornerback in the country. It was one of the top recruits in the nation. Actually reclassed and left early to go to North Carolina. So he's a guy that's actually younger than his, experience in college football. And he's a guy that can really help the corner because you lose Tyreek Stevenson probably to NFL draft. I don't know if that's officially been announced yet. DJ Ivy gone, right? Like it's great to have Cormani McLean. If you get Damari Brown, again, like it's awesome to have that 2023 class with potential early impact ability. But do you really want to be throwing an 18-year-old into the fire and lose that opportunity for development that it, could come with maybe slow playing it a little bit, right? Like they did that with Wesley Bissainthe. They didn't rush Wesley Bissainthe into the fire. We probably wish they would have a little bit earlier so we wouldn't have to watch so much of Corey Flagg and Caleb Johnson this year. But, it is what it is. And I think it probably was good for him development-wise. But overall, you got to bring in guys that can play right away out of this transfer portal. If they're talking about bringing 40 to 50 guys to completely flip this roster of 85, then part of those guys that come in outside of the 25 to 28 that they might get in that 2023 class has to be early impact guys. So the 15 to 20 guys you bring in the portal have to be really, really good players. They have to be Daryl Jacksons. They have to be Akeem Mesler. Those are the type of players that you have to bring to get to the level of Alabama's and Clemson and Georgia and Ohio State. Like that's where Mario Cristobal is talking about Miami going. That's why you give him a 10-year contract where he's one of the highest paid coaches in college football. We don't know the exact numbers, but we know that he's up there. So those are two guys with the pedigree in place, the athletic traits, the size to be guys that could come here, completely flip the script of what their college career has been thus far and be guys that fit perfectly for Miami.
Another guy I think is a perfect fit for Miami is Francisco Mauigoa, man. When you talk about linebackers, he fits the mold of the type of linebacker that Cristobal and this Miami staff want. 6'3", 230 pounds, really athletic, recorded 77 total tackles for Washington State, and 3.5 sacks, forced fumble, and had a 95 interception for a touchdown. He's just an athletic guy that I would probably play over a Caleb Johnson, or maybe even a Corey Flagg as well. And of course, he is the older brother of the 5-star 2023 commit Francis Mauigoa. So I don't see any reason why Miami wouldn't land him in the class, because he just seems like a slam dunk for this class for those reasons. You need more depth at linebacker. He's super athletic, and you kind of lock in Francis Mauigoa just in case he was thinking about, going somewhere else. I don't think he does anyway, but still, I'm sure, little brother is telling older brother of how great, the coaching staff is or whatnot. And a chance to kind of play with your brother, I think is always a good thing. I don't see that as a detriment in any way. So looking forward to just him eventually signing with the class. I feel best about him and Javion Cohen signing to the class at this when it comes to transfers. Bram Walden, that's another name that we got to mention. Offered from Miami, one of the first offers for Miami. Another former Oregon West Coast prospect here, and 6'5", 304. This is a guy that is another player that can add to depth to that offensive line. We saw how the offensive line was decimated with injuries. I mean, we had to play, true freshmen on this line with the Nez Cooper, which, the future's bright for Coop, obviously, but, you don't want to be in a situation where you're playing true freshmen. So Bram Walden is another player to kind of keep on the radar, as Miami did offer him this week. But yeah, there are of course depth concerns at certain positions because we're up to 15 players that have transferred out of Miami, Frank. I mean, that's a lot. And that number is probably going to grow. And a lot of the players that transferred out were not surprises. A lot of them we kind of knew were going to happen or rumored were going to happen when it comes to Romello Brinson, when it comes to Jalen Knighton, when it comes to Thad Franklin. We kind of been alluding to that all season that these guys may jump in the portal based on lack of playing time. But I think the biggest surprise, like you mentioned, was Daryl Jackson. Of course, that was a family situation, so I understand it. But as far as with the transfers, what position concerns you the most based on depth?
Defense tackle, easily. Right now, it's alarming. Right now, what they like it. Leonard Taylor, in my opinion, is the most talented defensive tackle in the country outside of Jalen Carter, who's going to be in the NFL draft this year. We know how good he is. We've seen the flashes of greatness, right? There's been games this year where he's been the best defensive player in college football. So it's great to have him. I think losing Jordan Miller, losing Daryl Jackson, right, losing Elijah Roberts, losing Allen High, you can't lose 4 players on the interior defensive line when you're already graduating some guys and thinking that you're going to be okay. Right, there's going to have to be some digging here. I think that there's probably going to be some guys that aren't in the portal yet that we're going to see start to get some traction to Miami. So that's something to watch. I think that they're like Tanmisi Adelaide, like that's a guy that they're going to be going after really hard. That's going to be a guy that you're going to see, Ruiz on the phone with. You're going to see life wallet opportunities coming out of nowhere, right? He's going to be one of those guys that becomes a focal target in this class because he has a David Hicks type profile, right? 6'4", 6'5", 290 pounds, right? Can play the 3, also has the strength to jump inside on passing downs at the 1, right? Like if you really needed him to. Helps you in the run game, but also has some pass rush ability. Former top recruit. You miss out on a guy like that in the last class because he's looking at Texas A&M's record class and Ohio State, and you're kind of on the outside looking in on that chance to redeem yourself and grab a defensive tackle that you might not had a chance with out of high school. But a guy that is going to be big is Ahmad Moten, right? Like they love him. We've heard really good things. And I think they need to continue to push for those 3-star type guys in 2023. Because remember, Ahmad Moten was a late take. He kind of blew up really late in the process. You and I got a chance to see him early on in the spring game and stuff like that for Cardinal Gibbons. We saw the ability. We just didn't know if he was going to be a Miami guy. So those are the things that they're going to have to do. Alonzo Highsmith's going to have to earn his contract by really, uncovering these gems. And we've seen him do it. Right, the Andrew Armstrong kid who they offered very early on in the transfer portal process was a guy that he discovered. Colby Young was a guy that he discovered. We know that he has the ability to spot that talent, and we're going to have to see him do that at defensive tackle because I am worried going into next season. We've seen Miami get gashed in the run game.
Oh yeah,
for years, right, and that can continue if you don't have the depth, especially if Coach Steele is still the defensive coordinator, to run that 3-level rotation with 4 or 5 guys at defense tackle. It's just not going to work. You don't have enough bodies. So, we saw them really ramp it up defensively, especially on the defensive line last year in the transfer portal. And I think that we're going to see a very heavy influx of talent in regards to the defensive line this year as well.
Yeah, totally agree about the need to ramp up that particular position group. I'm going to run some names by you. And by the way, we have an ongoing list on CanesCounty.com that we update several times a day as far as transfer portal prospects, updates on recruits, updates on prospects in recruiting as well. So check that out on CanesCounty.com. Some of the names on the D line from our list. I've got who do I got here? Let's see. I've got Oluwasi Omotoshu, Tosho. I'm butchering these names. He's from Wyoming.
The Wyoming guy.
Yeah. And then you got Bill Norton from Georgia, who I don't particularly like. You got Jalen Lee from Florida. Could be a possibility there. Cedric Roberts, freshman from Oklahoma. Chase Carter is 6'6", 235, freshman from Michigan State. I'm gonna go through all the names here, and you tell me who you like. Marquise Robinson out of Auburn, freshman. Let's see, we've got Logan Fano out of BYU, freshman, 6'4", 240.
So he's going to Utah with his brother. His brother just committed, actually. So he'll end up making that move to Utah.
Okay, unfortunate to hear that. We got Jordan Butler from Northwestern, 6'2", 316. This is a guy I don't even like. Lloyd Summerall from Florida. I don't think that's a take for Miami, not even a little bit.
I think he's a little interesting, though. I think he's a little interesting. Polk County kid, right?
Yeah.
I know that they're continuously trying to build up that Polk County pipeline. I think that's why Sam McCall is a little interesting. But I wouldn't be surprised if they kick the tires on Lloyd Summerall, just because, at defensive end, he could be a depth guy, high upside depth guy. I haven't heard anything on them reaching out or there being any communication yet. I just think he was a guy coming out of high school that, had some athletic traits that made him really intriguing. I think those are still there. I think the development with a lot of the Florida kids really hasn't been up to par. And he's a perfect example of that. So with the Polk County relationship building, with Cormani McLean, kind of dipping his foot into the water of other programs, I wouldn't be surprised to Miami maybe say, we are trying to add 40 to 50 guys. Is adding Lloyd Summerall as a high upside defensive end prospect, adding Sam McCall to help that safety depth, going to hurt us? Probably not. So he's actually an interesting name for me. Defensive line-wise, we've kind of talked about it before, and there hasn't been any talk yet, but Alton Tarber out of Oklahoma from Deerfield Beach, 6'2", 295 to 300 pounds. We've seen him just absolutely bully people on the high school level. He is as strong as a defensive tackle as you're going to find. Doesn't look the part typically just because he's so trimmed down as a defensive tackle and not that tall and long, but his strength as an undersized one technique really is intriguing for me at Miami. Miami was pushing for him when Mario Cristobal first came, trying to flip him from Georgia Tech very late in the process. He ended up signing to Oklahoma as a late decision. But I think he's a guy to watch. Maybe trying to get back home. Had some injury issues his first year. He would be coming here as an immediate playing time guy who would have 4 years to play. 4 years to play.
Yeah.
He redshirted. I don't think he played a game this season. So for me, that's really intriguing. Another name that might be familiar to some Canes fans, leaving Coastal Carolina, I don't think he would be like a high impact guy, but Willie Moise from Chaminade Madonna, big player who just didn't, academically had some issues, and that was part of the reason that he didn't end up in this class when he was supposed to come to Miami. But he was like a long-time commit for Miami. Big body, can help out at defensive tackle, right? Like we've seen them take, the Mitchell Agudes of the world where they weren't superstars at other spots, right? But fit kind of a role what they're looking for. So he's another interesting name of somebody I'd be looking at defensive tackle. And listen, who knows what happens with Shamar Stewart, right? Who knows what happens there? And he could be a versatile piece that, with everything happening at Texas A&M, would not be surprised to see him jump into the portal at some point. If he does, I wouldn't be surprised to see Miami on him. Haven't heard anything on it yet. just speculation. I think any kid at Texas A&M has an opportunity to be in the portal. From what we've seen, what are they? They're over like 20 now, right?
Yeah, it definitely seems that way. Every other day, or every day, or every hour, actually.
Yeah,
it feels like an Aggie's in the portal.
Yeah, and surprisingly, Bama's kind of like that too this year, right? You're seeing like Tommy Brockheimer, right? Like we're seeing Javion Cohen, right? We're seeing Christian Leary, right? Who's another interesting name for me. He was out of Edgewater. He was a star, man. He
Absolutely.
was a star. Yeah, I remember him being one of those guys. We were like, I hope he ends up at Miami. He was a borderline 5-star prospect, explosive slot receiver. He was the polished version of Brashard Smith. That's really what he was, in my opinion. And I think for a while there was some traction with Miami.
There was,
Yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised to see if that traction builds back up. He tried the Bama route, didn't work out. JoJo World that you just mentioned, explosive is the only way to describe that kid. And listen, we can love Ray, we can love Robbie, we can love X, we can love all the guys that we put at the slot, right? But Josh Gaddis might have to open up this offense a little bit more so you can put those guys in the field. He talked about it last year, trying to put Brashard Smith and Xavier Restrepo on the field at the same time. We didn't ever see it really come to fruition. We saw Brashard Smith kind of throw some subtle shots on Twitter towards the end of the year with his period tweet, in regard to the press conference comments of Josh Gaddis. But I think that either one of those guys could come in and be an early impact guy at slot, especially if we're going to utilize a rotation of receivers and if we're trying to get speed. If Jakari Brown is your fastest player on your team, you got a problem. And both of those guys are easily faster than Jakari Brown.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Alton Tarver, I hope that comes to fruition. I totally agree with you on that. And JoJo Earl and Christian Leary, these guys, I hope become on Miami's radar. A couple other names I wanted to throw out there as far as on the D line is Chambray Jackson out of Florida State, Jarrett Jackson used to be out of Palm Beach Gardens, out of Louisville, is a player to kind of keep your eye on. Henry Bryant is a player that I liked a lot at Atlantic, but he's a little undersized. Kind of reminds me of the size of a Nestor Silvera. He's in the portal. Just kind of wanted to mention him. Dallas Walker is another one of those Texas A&M guys. This guy is 6'4", 305. He's now in the portal. That's somebody I think Miami should consider just because of the lack of depth at the position. Katron Evans, out of Jackson State. This is a guy with 4-star coming out of St. Francis. I think this is a guy that they should definitely consider as well. 6'5", 315. Another guy who could definitely fill a need at defensive tackle there. And I had a couple others here. Andre Carter, another defensive end that could fill a need, as well as Braden Fisk. These are two out of Western Michigan. And then you got this is another tongue twister name here. Osita Inma Okwanu from Notre Dame. This is a athletic guy, another undersized guy. As far as but he was productive at Notre Dame. So who else I got here? Once again, you can see the entire list on canecounty.com that we are updating. Yeah, that's pretty much it as far as any of those names on the D line that sound intriguing to you. For me, it's Katron Evans. I think that's a kid that Miami should definitely go after.
Yeah, I could see that. Another kid that I could see Miami go after is Keyshawn Silver out of North Carolina, former big-time prospect. I think one of the things Miami's going to do, and you're going to typically see from all the top programs, is they're either going to go after really high production guys at mid-tier levels, right, or FCS levels, which we've seen, Miami do countless times before, or they're going to go after really high pedigree prospects that just didn't pan out at other schools that still have, quite some time on their clock. And I think, Silver's one of those guys, former big-time prospect. And honestly, I really think that the guys that they're going to be going after are not guys that are currently in the portal, right? Like we're what, 3 days into the portal, right? 4 days into the portal, 3.5 days basically. So it's still early, man. It's still early. We saw that massive exodus from pretty much every school on that first day on the 5th. But since then, right, it's kind of dwindled a little bit, but we're still hearing, kids have their exit interviews with schools, still having those conversations with staffs trying to figure out what's going on there. We're also still seeing bowl games happen, right? A lot of these kids are not trying to leave during bowl games. And I think you're going to start to see some starters from teams that are not trying to leave their team before the bowl games happen that you could see make some moves maybe closer to the beginning of January. So I think that's going to be something to watch. And honestly, a curious question that I have for you is, do you think Miami stays put at quarterback? That there are so many really good players in the portal. We saw 62 quarterbacks jump in the first day, and a lot of those were starters. I mean, right? Like Devin Leary from North Carolina State was a big time player, right? Yeah. Really good player. And I'm sure he's going to go somewhere where there's going to be an automatic playing time opportunity just because it's his final go around. But Sanders out of Oklahoma State, right? Like it's just one guy after the other. And I think that there are some intriguing names. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, in my opinion, I feel like they should go for a quarterback. Spencer Sanders is a quarterback that I like out of Oklahoma State. I think that of all the quarterbacks, I think he is the guy for me. Devin Leary, to me, I think he's kind of the same guy as Tyler Van Dyke. So, I think the right thing to do is to go for another transfer portal quarterback, just because you had such a lack of a production at the position this season. I mean, and you need a guy to kind of push Tyler Van Dyke to really be even better than he is. From what I hear, they're pretty much done as far as 2023 quarterbacks. I still feel like that there's a possibility that they do take a quarterback. It's highly unlikely, but I think, you got to kick the tires on players like I said, Spencer Sanders, or if they did want to take a chance with Devin Leary, DJ Uwangalele, I wouldn't take a chance on, honestly. I just wouldn't. Some other players, Austin Reed from Western Kentucky is trending as one of those top quarterbacks that are available out there. But yeah, I think they should take a quarterback. I mean, obviously it's a filled quarterback room, with the quarterbacks that you have, I guess. But I don't see any reason why you wouldn't take a chance at another quarterback. McNamara's already going to Iowa. Davis Brin is a quarterback out of Tulsa that you could just take a chance on. Hudson Card out of Texas, highly recruited kid, not getting a chance over there at Texas. Now with Arch Manning coming to the fold, he's taking his chance at the portal. So I wouldn't be mad at that either. So those are some names definitely I think Miami should definitely take a chance on as far as quarterback is concerned. But we'll see exactly what they do. A couple of other names I do want to mention that Miami has offered is Jeremiah Byers. I don't think we mentioned him. Another offensive line guy out of UTEP, 6'4", 331. He's a sophomore. Played over 800 snaps and graded over 80 with Pro Football Focus. He's scheduled to actually visit Florida State this weekend. But I think that's a guy that Canes fans should keep on the radar. And then Jamari Butler, I just want to make sure I mentioned him. I'm not sure if I did or not, but they did offer the defensive lineman out of Nebraska, 6'5", 245, another guy who can, of course, be a rotational guy. He's an Alabama native. Though that was another offer from Miami that went out this week. So let's talk about the recruits, though. A lot of transfer talk, and we're going to continue to update our transfer and recruiting tracker on canecounty.com. But there's been a lot of buzz on the recruits as of late, and I'll go down the list there. Brandon Ennis seems like he's, not going to be a guy to commit to Miami more and more, right? And then you got players like Mark Fletcher looking like he's trending towards Florida. You got Samson Okunlola also looking like he's trending towards Florida. When it comes to the public view or the public opinion, that's what it seems like. What's your opinion on those three prospects, Ennis, Okunlola, and Fletcher?
I think Ennis is probably going to stay just because the one opportunity we as for Miami to get some,
You mean stay with Ohio State, right? Not stay home, right?
No, he's going to stay Ohio State because, I was hoping and praying Brian Hartline was going to take that Cincinnati job. I think we all were. We're so tired of seeing the top receivers in high school go to Ohio State and the Alabamas of the world, and he would have just been one notch to take away from Ohio State, and I think that would have really given Miami a chance. So with him locking in for at least the next year, I don't see anything changing. I know that Brandon's not probably not going to sign until February, so that makes things a little interesting, right? Like you can get him on campus a few more times and continue to show him the love, and maybe the boosters throw out some NIL opportunities that Ohio State might not be doing. We're hearing the rumors that they're not even paying guys that are not inside their one or two level on their depth chart right now. So it's a pay for play type thing, right? Like if you're not playing, you're not getting paid, right? So, I think that could be an intriguing thing. But if you put a gun to my head and told me where's Brandon is going to go, I'm going Ohio State. Now,
Same.
With Mark Fletcher and Samson Okunlola, I think Samson Okunlola is just flirting, right? I think he's just trying to make sure all his options and all stones are unturned with going to Florida, right? I think that he ends up in Miami. He already announced his commitment is going to be on the 15th. So I think that decision's pretty much been made, right? Like a week out, I think he pretty much knows the deal. I think he's just trying to make sure, he didn't there's nothing there that he didn't see or catch, the first time, because this is his second time visiting. And Mark Fletcher, I know that there was an in-home with Florida. I still think Miami's there. And another interesting thing is having Chris Johnson, having the last word for Chris Johnson. We have talked about this, right? Like, we know that he's been flirting with the Clemsons, the Ole Misses, right? Like, trying to see what else is out there. But we've seen time and time again with Chris Johnson that it seems to be whoever has his ear last is going to be the team that ends up being the favorite. I spoke to him last night, and he's telling us that Miami's his number one school right now, right? And now that could just be hearsay from the kid. That could be him just kind of blowing smoke about the process. But he is giving Miami the last visit. And the other thing is Mark Fletcher's also going to give Miami the last visit before early signing day. To be able to get the last visits for those two kids, I think is huge because you get to completely exhaust all your recruiting ammunition right there with nobody else to follow up right behind you with some negative recruiting, right? Like in-homes are done, right? Nobody's going to be going to see these kids in person, right? Like state championships are already over, right? So all these things come into play, in my opinion, with an advantage for Miami. And I think that with Mark Fletcher, in my opinion, ending up going to Miami, I think that Damari Brown also ends up at Miami. And I think that you're looking at a lock-it-in top 5 class for Miami in 2023.
All right. So you think Christopher Johnson commits to Miami then?
I think that there's a high opportunity for Miami to sign him on early signing day. We know that he is not going to announce before then. Like I said, if Miami can get his ear last, right? Like if as long as he's not taking a midweek visit or something, and we've seen that happen before, right? With Jerry Jeudy visiting visiting Miami right before signing day, and them almost flipping him from Bama. But I still think that there's a chance that he goes elsewhere. I'm not 100% on Chris Johnson to Miami, but the trending is Miami because they're getting the last visit. As we've seen, whoever gets that visit becomes kind of the top school for the speedster. And I think Miami's in a really good spot there. And we obviously know that there is a need. There is a dire need at running back with so many bodies leaving. Javonte Citizen coming off a bad knee injury. We hope he's going to end up being the guy that they thought he was going to be. But it could be Don Chaney 2.0, right? Like where we don't ever know what he's going to be. He could just be injured constantly. I don't wish that on the kid, knock on wood. You hope that it's a great recovery and he comes out and he's a 1,200-yard back next year along with Henry Parrish, right? Like he's the Hassan Haskins of Miami for Josh Gaddis. Like that's what you want, right? But you don't know if that's what it's going to be. So if you can grab a Mark Fletcher and a Chris Johnson to fit the roles of the two backs in this offense, a speedster and a power back, your yin and your yang, I think that you're looking at a bright future in the run game for Miami going forward.
Speaking of the running backs, I'm surprised that Miami hasn't offered Byron Cardwell yet. I feel like he is the perfect running back to jump into this running back room. Big power back, has great quickness, can take it the distance as well. Could be an every down back if you need him to be. Of course, is familiar with Mario Cristobal and being from Oregon. I'm surprised they haven't jumped on him yet. I think he would be a perfect fit at Miami. And I totally agree with you about Samson Okunlola. I do feel like he is just, he's enjoying his process, or he is taking advantage of visits that are being offered to him. I do strongly believe that he is still going to commit with the class, despite what those Gator fans and writers may think or may try to put out there. I do think Pancake Honcho still stays with Miami. Damari Brown, I'm kind of 50-50. I'm not absolutely sure. With Caleb Downs going to Alabama, I think that makes it a better option for Damari Brown to be at Miami. I would probably say maybe 60-40 for me to Miami when it comes to Damari Brown. Fletcher, I'm actually worried about the most, Frank. It just I know you're more on the inside than I am with what's going on with him, but it just worries me the most just because of kind of what he's put out there, showing that he's going to be visiting there this week, and they visited him recently as well. Hopefully Miami gets the last visit next weekend. I think that would be key, but that one I'm totally 50-50 on. Not quite sure where that goes. Miami's also, it seems like they're out with Jermaine Matthews. Jermaine Matthews seems like he's locked in with Ohio State. So that potentially opens up that spot for Damari Brown, being that, the 4-star from Cincinnati is going to stay home, which seems very likely. Last thing I wanted to ask is Tayshawn Lyons. Tayshawn Lyons will be committing next week. And actually another person I'm going to ask about, which is an obvious one that we're going to also going to be committing next week as well. But your thoughts on Tayshawn Lyons and where he is going to go with his final four of Notre Dame, Oregon, Washington, and Miami.
Yeah, I think Miami's still in the race, but I think this is Washington. I think a lot of the Miami smoke kind of went away over the last month or so. I think, at one point he might have been a silent commit, and there was a lot of traction to Miami. But I also think that they're looking heavily in the transfer portal. They might not have been on him as heavy as they probably were at the beginning, right? Like he's not getting the Brandon Ennis treatment. That's not really what's happening here. I think they do like his speed. I think they like what he brings to the table in regards to length on the outside, and he fits kind of what they're looking for and what they kind of need. as a guy that can stretch the field. They don't have too many of those guys on the roster right now. But I think he ends up going to Washington. He's a super West Coast kid. And, and Washington's been on him for a little bit. I think they were on him even before Miami was. So that's where I think he ends up. And I know exactly who you are asking about as the next guy to commit next Friday, and it is the Bane, Ruben Bane, right?
Yes,
Miami Central legend, all-time sack leader in the history of South Florida, arguably the greatest high school defensive end in South Florida, right?
History, right? Yeah,
Miami, baby. It's Miami. It's Miami.
It's Miami. Miami. We can bet the bank on it, bet the house on it, bet the wife on it.
I'm betting the house on it. Put my mama on it. I'm putting my dog on it. Like whatever you want me to put on it, I'm putting on it. I think that's where he ends up, man. There's been too many things to happen in Miami's favor in this recruitment, and I think that not only do they end up with Ruben Bane, I think they end up with Stanquan Clark as well.
Wow.
There are just too many factors that. Let's be candid. Auburn and Louisville messed up, man. They messed up, right? Scott Satterfield had a good thing going at Louisville. He had Ruben Owens in the class. He had Stanquan Clark. He was trending for Ruben Bane after Auburn's mess ups, right? Like you got Pierce Clarkson in the class. You got Kateris Hicks, who we love. You got DeAndre Moore. Like it is a who's who class for Louisville this year, and he leaves to go to Cincinnati. And I get it, structure and of the contract and the ability to make a little bit more money is important, but Louisville messed up. Auburn, you fire Rock Bellantoni. What are you doing? At least wait till February. Keep them on staff. You know what I'm saying? And then you get rid of them afterwards. Once you get the kids in the building, they couldn't even do that. So, I think both of those teams are easily out of this process. Alabama, I think they're still there, right? But I don't think that they're recruiting Ruben as hard as Miami is, and with so many family factors in there, NIL opportunities for Miami, the opportunity to stay home. He's extremely family oriented. Dad and mom are very involved in this process. For them to be able to come to every game, I think is a benefit as well. And I think that he stays home. And I think the same thing with Stanquan Clark. I think they want him bad. And I know everybody's going to say 5 linebackers in the class. How is that? Right?
That's what I was going to ask. Like, this is going to be the best linebacker class of all time for Miami.
But you need it. Yeah. Like outside of Wesley Bissainthe, you don't have a guy that you can factually say is going to be a guy that makes an impact on this team in the future, right? Corey Flagg can be a guy that burns snaps, but we've seen him outside of being a guy that blitzes and makes tackles for loss in the backfield do anything for this team. He's just not what you're looking for. I think he's a good player. I think if he went to somewhere else, I think if he returned back home to Texas, there would definitely be some options for him, especially if somebody runs like a 3-4 type scheme where you're utilizing like a Mike Backer that just has to play tackle to tackle. Yeah. That's where he would be best. But right now, you don't – Chase Smith, last time you and I saw him, he was on a scooter, right? He was on a scooter because he couldn't even walk, right? Like it – and we have not seen him get on the field. I mean, the last time we even really seen him play football, he was mostly playing receiver. So, he was a 750-yard receiver, double-digit guy, touchdown guy in high school. So we don't even know if he has the ability to play linebacker or the physicality that is needed. And remember, he's not a Mario Cristobal recruit. So to bring in 5 different guys, you flip that room. That means you have potentially 4 years of stability. The transfer portal always makes that a fun conversation. But I like the idea of 5 linebackers in this class, especially with the fact that if you wanted to, Malik Bryant could be a pass rush type guy on third down. So, versatile piece. And I think that, there's some intriguing physical profiles in that linebacker group, and Stanquan Clark would, in my opinion, be the best of the bunch.
Awesome. Congratulations to Chaminade Madonna, by the way. No surprise there. They blew out Clearwater Central Catholic. I think I think the shame of the year for Chaminade is the fact that they don't play Central, St. Thomas, or even
Patience,
Mater
patience,
Dei. You know,
patience,
like
patience.
that's the only downfall of this year. It's like what could have been or how great could have been, because this team, I mean, granted, this team is basically all coming back next season. So I think they should be the preseason number 1 team in the nation. We'll see what what the so-called experts think about them next fall or whatnot, but this team, outstanding. I mean, doesn't have a flaw, really. I mean, just top to bottom, just a great team. I heard there was a ton of recruits of scouts. I mean, at the game yesterday, and the first thing that came to my mind, Frank, when I heard that was like, oh my God, if Miami loses out on CJ Bailey, bro, I feel like, and he ends up being like a guy, like ends up being like one of those guys, it's going to be heartbreaking. It's going to be heartbreaking for people like us, who watch this kid and know how great he is, or the ceiling. Is there a ceiling? This kid can be really good. He's really good at avoiding pressure in the pocket. I know he has to improve on his mechanics when it comes to throwing the ball, but he's just, I just think if Miami misses out on this particular kid, and like everybody else, I think they have a chance at, right? Like a legitimate chance. I could see them in the class for next season. I could see JoJo, JJ, I could see Zaquan in the class next season. Really, especially if Miami has a 9-win or higher season. But yeah, so just wanted to kind of touch on that, just Chaminade and how great that team really is, and just how much of a focus Miami needs to have to land, potentially, I think if they land 4 kids from that team, that's a huge win. If I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility, but I do think that's a low possibility to land 4 kids from Chaminade. But because it just really doesn't happen. Not since 2007, really, since Randy Shannon landed like 6 kids from Miami Northwestern, did something like that happen. But
Well, IMG, we got 4 from IMG in this class.
True, we do. Yeah, so I mean, it could happen. But I just kind of wanted to comment on that, and just congratulate Coach Jones and all those coaches out there, all those great coaches out there that we know, and the job that Chaminade has done. They are officially like in the upper echelon of teams, not only in the state of Florida, like you have to mention Chaminade now, amongst Central, St. Thomas, and IMG. Like you have to mention Chaminade as one of those great teams. But now they're finally really being mentioned in the national stage, and this is a team that I would play against anybody in the country. I think they would beat any team outside of Florida.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and they're going to end up playing Bishop Gorman next week. I think they beat the brakes. I think they beat the brakes off him, and everybody wants to talk about Zachariah Branch. I think, he's a really good player, and I don't think one player is going to beat that Chaminade team, right? Because we know how good Chaminade is, and just to touch on what you were saying on CJ Bailey, right? Like I love Michael Van Buren, I love Aaron Norland. I think that there's a lot of talented quarterbacks. Isaac Wilson is another kid out of Corner Canyons in Utah, but CJ Bailey's a winner, man. He's a winner. This kid is going to finish the year with over 50 touchdowns, nearly 4,000 yards of total offense, right? Like those are type numbers that are historic in the state of Florida. And we're talking about a kid that is going to win 3+ state championships in his time in high school. right? As a 6'6", 210-pound kid with mobility, ability to evade.
Wow.
6'6". He has, since he's been in Little League, he's lost like a total of like 4 games since he was like 8 years old.
Wow.
Like, that's just it. He's just a winner. He's the epitome of a winner. And what people don't understand is if you recruit CJ Bailey, if you give CJ Bailey a shot, your chances of getting the phenom, Jeremiah Smith, right? And freak athletes Zaquan Patterson and Josiah Trader and Davion Gowes and even beyond that, CJ Ewald, who's a top 100 recruit for us, and Kyle Washington and all these kids that are going to be future stars for Chaminade, right? And are stars for Chaminade already are higher, right? Like, and I know we've seen kids from Chaminade not pan out, the Thad Franklins and Allen Highs, right? But we're seeing a different age of Chaminade kids right now, and you have to get in the boat there. You have to. There's no way you just let those kids go to another program. Like, if those kids are going to Ohio State, your chances of winning national titles is dwindling. And you and I spoke about it. I went back and I actually, took a look at some of the numbers. Like, Miami has only hit on like 15 kids in the local kids in the Rivals Top 250 in the last 10 years. That's an average of 1.5 a year. That is not good, right? Like, if you, out of all the kids, right, and on average there are like 9 to 10 kids that are in the Rivals Top 250 from South Florida, and you only get 1.5 of those kids, that is not good. That is not good. It is not, and that's the reason why, like, everybody wants to talk about the South Florida kid isn't panning out. No, the South Florida kids that we're recruiting aren't panning out, because never one time in the last 10 years has Miami gotten the top kid out of South Florida. That is an astounding stat when you are in a 30-mile radius of every single school down here. And anytime there's a kid who's the number one kid in South Florida, you never get him. It's either Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, or Florida State. That's not good, right? Florida State should not be getting kids that are the number one kid out of South Florida before you. And that's got to change. That's got to change. And it starts next year with Jeremiah Smith, who's the number 2 prospect in the country and probably as can't miss as you possibly can get. And we saw it again with 2 touchdowns last night, including a highlight reel one-hander. So
yeah, I saw that. It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Not surprised at all, though.
So CJ Bailey to Miami. We're talking about it. And
we're gonna start the campaign right here on CanesCounty.com. CJ to Miami.
Hashtag. We're gonna start the hashtag.
Yeah, man. So of course we've got more state championships to come. We're expecting, well, we're guaranteed to have at least two more, because we've got two South Florida matchups that will be happening next week, with Central versus American Heritage, and also Homestead against St. Thomas. So that is going to, well, one more thing is that we're hearing smoke about Cormani McLean. We heard may take a visit to Alabama. So that hasn't been confirmed on my end. What are you hearing on that, Frank?
I'm hearing that Nick Saban is coming hard. And, we went in the message boards and kind of talked about it. But I think that unless an absolute crazy NIL opportunity comes across Cormani McLean's desk, this ain't happening. I'm not really worried here. From everything I'm hearing, Miami was in a really good spot when he did commit. Just last week, DeMarcus Van Dyke was on the field with his mom, talking to her pretty much the entire game, while also evaluating his teammate, right, and sidekick cornerback, Shadarian Harrison, right, who's a Pitt commit. So it's like, for me, there's just too many things in place for Miami to get him. I think it's much similar to a Samson Okunlola situation, where a kid is kicking the tires before early signing day and just making sure he's covering all his bases. And I think that Bama is coming hard, and he wants to respect, someone who's considered the GOAT, Nick Saban. He's going to hear him out. Even if you're not going to go there, you want to make sure you hear him out, right? And I think that he deserves that respect. Like, as Miami fans, we can't be mad at a kid when the guy who's done the best at developing defensive back talent comes and calls on a kid. He's gonna be heard out. And I respect the kid for, kind of going through the process the way that he is. He's been pretty quiet. You don't see him flirting around too much. He's been pretty much all about Miami, wearing Miami gear, since his commitment. And
yeah,
I think that is there always a chance Nick Saban can pull off a miracle? Same way we talk about Mario Cristobal pulling off miracles. Absolutely. Yeah. I just do not feel. I don't feel worried about this one, just because of the NIL factor that is tied in here.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. I think Miami's got the inside on this one. Of course, you can't count Alabama out, like you said, but I think Cormani is pretty much locked in. The 5-star that's committed to the 2023 class, number 3 overall prospect. All right, so that is going to wrap it up for the Storm Tracker podcast. I'm Marcus Benjamin again, and he is Frank Tucker. Like I said, be sure to follow us on Twitter at Canes_County, Instagram Canes.County. Also, definitely subscribe to our website for exclusive information, CanesCounty.com. Subscribe to us on YouTube as well at Canes County. Until the next episode.